Good day, everyone. My name is Taylor Newton, and this is Old News, a place to go to learn about ancient topics. So today I will be discussing the funeral games. Now, what exactly are funeral games? So funeral games are athletic competitions held in the honor of a recently passed person. These people were likely civic heroes, so people very important to the community at large, like maybe say a founder of like the city, or it'd be a private individual who was famous and or rich and or just had enough, I guess, popularity to have these funeral games held after their funeral rites. Um, Now, funeral games were quite common in ancient civilizations like ancient Greece and Rome. So, at least for ancient Greece, there's historical examples of funeral games being held. Um, from the late 6th century BC all the way until the end of the Hellenistic period, which was around 30 BC. So, so funeral games weren't just, about the sports. They were also held, again, in honor of people of high status. In mythological and historical games, the sporting events were held after the funeral rites were and offerings had been completed as like I guess like a last hurrah in a sense. So, in a famous example would be the Aeneid by Virgil, the Roman epic poet. Um, in his book, from page 111, line 45, or at least in book 5 of this epic, Aeneas, he had gathered his men and told all of them that he would be holding funeral rites for his father who passed away 1 year ago, um, shortly after ish the fall of Troy. Um, and he wanted to appease, Aeneas wanted to appease the gods, and he finally had the chance to do so. So he said to his men that he would hold the rites, or the funeral rites, for 8 days, making sacrifices and praying. Um, and on the ninth day, Aeneas would begin the games with a race, both foot and boat racing, and there would be javelin throwing, there'd be an archery competition, there'd even be boxing and or wrestling. It was kind of like a wasn't like traditional boxing we have today. And he made sure that there was going to be prizes for all the winners of each sporting competition. So all the games in this story played an important role in the epic's plot just by foreshadowing the future outcomes of important characters and situations that Aeneas um, would be going through. Even foreshadowing his future standing with his men. Um, this example of the funeral games was super important um, because it just showed how important funeral games were to the ancient Greeks and future Romans. And the reason I say future Romans is because Aeneas and his men are Trojans, so they were around before the founding of Rome. They were kind of like the start of it. Anyway, um, these games were great because they not only like again played it as a plot point, but they were showing piety piety to the gods through their sports playing, through their competitions and winning. They were respecting Aeneas's father, who was a great man, um, but he couldn't see his son become future ruler. And it even brought again all of Aeneas's men who were feeling very downtrodden, um, brought them together and raised morale amongst all the group. Now, having gone over a famous historical example, or not historical, but historically fictional, I guess, example of the funeral games. Um, I actually wanted to show you, wait, here we go, this Amphros right here, and it was done by Amphiaraos. I'm so sorry if I butchered that. And it was dated to be around or done around 560 BC, so well within that time of ancient Greece. And the Amphiros crater depicts on the front a frieze of a horseman, and above it is the departure of um, Amphiros. I think it's the middle one right here. And the back, which is the lower, was decorated with a battle frieze. And above that, again, the creator. And this time, he was a participant in the funeral games of Peleus. Um, and then, of course, below the handles were at the very top of, sorry, the very top of this image are two men wrestling, again, part of the games. Um, so just a little bit of context. Peleus was the king of Iolcus in Greek mythology. He was the one who had sent like the great hero Jason on the quest to get the Golden Fleece. Um, so the painter had put himself into mythology with by using the funeral games that were held. Um, I'm sorry. He put himself into mythology, making himself great by doing that, just by showing it in his pottery. Now, while it is like an actual historical artifact that is showing like mythology portrayed, most of them do. And within this picture, if you look a little bit closer, you can see like the horses, and you can see how horse racing, especially back then, was kind of important. Um, yes, so just as a general, here's a fun example of actual work from a Grecian working on something commemorating a funeral game. So here's the question: do funeral games still exist? Like, does learning about ancient funeral games even matter? Well, I would say one, of course it matters because it's the foundation of just modern society as well. But to answer the question of do funeral games still exist, the answer is both yes and no. Uh, they're not nearly in the same format as they were back in the days where there were multiple sports competitions done by, you know, hundreds of men, maybe. Um, our modern day memorial services and funerals, while they do mimic ancient traditions and customs, of course, modern society has modern ideals and differences in just ideology, so it's not quite the same. But again, completely unheard of to have like an Olympic style event for one individual unless they're extremely important. Um, it's just way too expensive for modern day no regular people. So the closest we can get to a funeral game would be memorial games, like memorial bowls for certain sports, or dedicating a building that is for sports or for like the sports community, um, and naming it in the honor of a deceased athlete or someone very close to the athletic world. Um, so take for example, the Pat Run. The Pat Run is run by the Pat Till Foundation. So it is a 4.2-mile run that is held every single year in Tempe, Arizona. And again, it's dedicated to Pat Tillman, who was a Arizona Cardinal football player, and he died tragically while serving as an Army Ranger in the Afghanistan War. Um, he became a soldier in the peak of his sporting career because believed it was what was right to do. Um, and again, every year they host this run. Hundreds of thousands of people go and run and walk the track just to raise awareness, raise money for the foundation to give to students to make to fund their education and encourage people to make the world a better place. Um, and if you want an example even closer to home than Tempe, Arizona, You can even just look at the McHale Center. So the McHale Center is the home of the Arizona Wildcats basketball team. McHale Center is named in the honor of JF or Pop McHale, who was a major athletic figure at the University of Arizona from 1914 to 1957. At the time, he was head coach of all the sports athletics teams. And if you were to look into it nowadays, we basically have a team in every sport available. So wasn't as big at the scale back then, but even so, it was a lot. Um, so while the building itself, the giant stadium, is dedicated to him and his hard work and excellence as a um, university coach, he even people under his tutelage, we Arizona Wildcats became the Wildcats. That's how important he was. But anyway, the basketball court within the McHale Center is actually dedicated towards Lute Olson and his wife, Bobby Olson. And it was dedicated in January 2001 because Lute Olson coached basketball at the U of A for 20 years, and under him, university became acknowledged as a top tier school, and he produced multiple pro athletes from our university with his skill. Um, and in general, the couple has impacted not just the university and the sports program, but just the city of Tucson in general. Like they're very generous and good people. Um, so yeah, like modern day, again, we don't quite have, you know, let's do 5 events in a row and have like a winners for everyone, get prizes for everything. It's much more of remembering the person nowadays and much more of raising awareness of any case, using these people's um, popularity, fame, um, just kindness to spread more of that, spread awareness again. Um, yeah, so it's not quite the same, but it's still there in spirit, which leads to funeral games in our spirit. Now, funeral games of the ancients are a thing of the past. We won't have that kind of scale anymore just because we don't have the money in general. But even though we don't have that, funeral games, like their spirit or their purpose, still lives on within our memorials and our funeral traditions here in modern day. We still build and dedicate monuments and buildings to these great people and athletes who made a difference in the lives of others. You know, we still hold memorial sports events in the honor of past athletes who were not just athletes, but they were greater than their position in their sport. You know, they became heroes of the people. And our modern heroes are just like our ancients, you know, like we are just like our ancients. We exalt our heroes in death and we trade their stories, we trade their myths, um, we trade their feats while praying for their souls, praying for um, each other, pretty much, you know, and we continue to remember them while we play sports, while um, we, dedicate and memorialize them. So, yeah, um, thank you so much, and I hope to see you again next time.